I hope that you will honor the magic in you by understanding that you cannot fully contain, predict, or control its expression. Hello, sunshine, and welcome back to Paradigm Shift with Ayanda, a place where we reframe what is and reimagine what could be. I hope you enjoy today's episode. Let's paradigm shift together. To honor the title of this episode, I have written nothing down, and I am going to let this conversation unfold and let it become. So many of us get really stuck in the planning mode, and we try to plan everything, and we ask ourselves these questions: should I go this way or should I go that way? So for example, when it comes to starting a project, you may think to yourself, I need to have my one thing, but I don't know what that thing is. And so we obsess and we really think about how we want this thing to unfold, instead of just letting ourselves let it become. Because paradoxically, being and becoming are so interconnected. Just as we cannot help being, we also cannot help becoming. And so interestingly, when we let something new be, we let it become. And that's the conversation I want to talk about today. I want to talk about surrendering and releasing ourselves from the planning mindset, from the control mindset, from the predictability mindset, into a mindset of embracing uncertainty. That's what we want to get into today. First, I want to say that this relates to so many aspects of life. In a creative project, we may try to plan to a T what we want this new podcast to be, or this book that we're writing about to be, or this idea we have for starting a YouTube channel or a TikTok presence, any of these things. We may plan and plan and plan. We're talking to our friends, we're talking to ourselves. We are creating lists and lists and lists of what we need to do or what we could do. And then sometimes there's this big trade-off in our mind of, like, for example, should I go general or should I have a niche? You know? Should I make the name this or should I make it that? Instead of just allowing us the gift of starting and letting it unfold. Creatively, things become something so different from what you expected them to be in the beginning. So for example, this podcast is always evolving, and currently it's in an era that's really about creativity, and it's about the things that I need, like the food that I need to keep going on this creative path that I'm hoping other people can be nourished by as well. And so it's about nourishment, and it's about creativity, and it's about believing in yourself enough to create. Because that's the phase that I'm in. But when I started this podcast, that's not what I thought it would be about at all. You know what I mean? Because in the beginning, I was planning and I was saying, okay, I want it to be about this and this and this. And with the name Paradigm Shift, I imagined it to be big paradigms that I would be tackling. The problem is your energy may not be at the place that you think it will be in the beginning. And so I hope to loop back to that. I hope to have conversations around society, around social myths, around whose imagination are we living in. I just don't have the energy to bring that to you right now. But I'm letting it become. I'm letting it evolve in the way that it needs to. And I've by no means reached some point where you could say, oh, it's been a quote unquote success in the eyes of the society. But to me, it has been, because I'm honoring my consciousness and I'm honoring my becoming, and I'm sharing myself in a way that feels daunting to me, but also fully necessary. And I'm also hearing incredible stories and feedback from you. I read all the comments on the Spotify poll function, which please interact. I read them and I love them, and they nourish me and they lift me up. And I need to find a way to incorporate that feedback into these episodes, but I'm going to let that happen and let that become. But basically, this era that it's in, I'm really proud of, because I have trusted in the mystery. Remember, lean into mystery, not mastery, from Julia Cameron. So I think that that's really, really important. But another area of life this shows up in is relationships. How often do so many of us obsess over what we are looking for in someone? We say, I want them to be this. They can't be this, but I want them to be that. We are obsessing over the criteria, especially if you're a maximizer, meaning that you try to seek out the optimal, the best option, which has been so culturally informed, right? Because our choices are being shaped by things like dating algorithms and by things like, or our conception of our choices, not our choices themselves, but our understanding of what we should be looking for is shaped by a dating platform that obviously just wants us hooked on its algorithm and on its mechanism of seeking partnership, if that's what we're doing, or seeking love, or whatever we are. So we obsess over what we want something to be. And then we deprive ourselves of the reality. Like we're living in an illusion. There is no perfect partner. There is no way to optimize or to construct this imaginary individual from thin air. And it's a form of avoidance. I saw a TikTok on this many years ago. I could not tell you whose it was, but they said that this type of perfectionism and this type of having such, not high standards, but like unrealistic standards. That's not realistic. It's not realistic that you can invent a human being and that person is going to be what transpires. Most people who are in long-term relationships say things like, this is not at all the person I expected to end up with, right? And I kind of no longer am fully seeking out this one person. Obviously, I long for romance, but I no longer have hinged all my requirements on this romantic ideal, which, as I've mentioned, I think can often be a distraction from how isolated so many people are and how much they are made to depend on a very like fragile relationship structure. I'll do another episode on that another time. But essentially, it's a form of depriving ourselves from the becoming, because when you're open-minded, you allow yourself to meet someone who you could never have thought would be the person for you. Right? And yet you have this deep, beautiful connection with them. Why? Because you cannot plan for that. It's like, imagine in nature, you plant a seed. You don't know what that tree is going to become. You can't say, I want a seed that grows to the left first and then to the right, but not too right, because that would be weird. Like, let's go left and let's stay straight, and then let's have lots of leaves, but not too many leaves on each branch, because that's what we do. Because we've grown up in this colonial imagination of society and of selfhood, we overestimate our ability to control our creations, our relationships, our lives. And so we also overestimate our ability to predict what we actually will want. How many people say this, where they say, I thought I wanted this, then I had that. So that's not what I wanted at all. You know what I mean? So when we think of creativity and relationships as seeds, then all we can do is do our best to nourish the seeds within us, to create the conditions such that they may grow, and then to just surrender and trust in the process. And then trust that not all of the seeds are going to grow. Not all of the seeds are going to be able to be nourished by the conditions and the environment that we're living in, by the people that surround us, the beings, the organisms, you know what I mean? By the atmosphere that it's in. And sometimes we have to let those seeds just be. Sometimes we don't have the energy to nourish those seeds. But to pretend that we can control, imagine this. Let's say you have an idea for something that you want to start, and you say, okay, this is the seed. By telling yourself you can control how that seed is going to grow, you're depriving yourself of the randomness and the absurdity and the real magic of chaos that can occur when we let things actually really just grow. And it's a way of trying to assert our need to dominate and control something uncontrollable. Someone on my Substack recommended the book, The Wisdom of Insecurity by Alan Watts to me. And it kept coming up, I kept being surrounded by messages from the universe that it wanted me to read this book. People kept mentioning it in these off-chance ways. And I decided, okay, fine, let me read this book. I've started it, I'm about 50 pages in, so a third of the way in. And one metaphor that has really stuck with me is, as humans, in our attempt to seek security, and by that we mean certainty, the lack of change, something fixed. He says that it's essentially like trying to send someone a parcel of water. So you take water, which is evolving, complex, fluid, which cannot be contained, and then you try to contain it, right? It's an impossible task, because you're taking something fluid and you're trying to make it fixed. You're taking something evolving and you're trying to make it unchanged. You're taking something expansive and you're trying to make it contained. You will never succeed. And in fact, the attempt itself speaks to your lack of willingness to accept the nature of the substance that you're dealing with. If you were to face the absolute truth of water, you would never try to send it in a parcel, in a package. You would accept the insecurity, as in literally lack of being secure, lack of the state of being secure. And you would say, well, this is a fluid and changing river substance. I cannot send it in a package. And yet when we try to simplify and we try to control and we try to dominate, we are doing the same thing. So to let it become is to understand that the nature of life and the nature of creating and the nature of relating is fluid. And it can't be contained, and it can't be predicted, and it can't be made to be fixed. And I think we underestimate our power when we try to fix ourselves. If you are trying to do something on the internet, for example, there's a lot of pressure to niche down and to have that one thing you're known for. This is something I grapple with. And even though I tell myself, you don't need that one thing, you can be yourself, you can be expansive, I still have that voice in my head that's saying, no, you need to have the thing. What is the thing? What do you do for people? Like, what is your one thing? And how can you keep doing that? And then I have to tell myself, I am not a commodity. I cannot be commodified. And the reason they want us to have a niche or to have one thing is so that we can be more consumable, so that we can be more easily consumed. But we are not born for consumption. And so if we want to share ourselves authentically, well, think about, speaking to people in your life, friends, or yourself, what you journal about. I mean, it changes literally every single day because you are changing. There may be themes that you are continually fascinated by, and that's beautiful and wonderful. And I do love it if you are the type of person who is deeply in love with something. I think that's amazing, but we need to honor ourselves. We need to honor the fact that we are water that cannot be put into a parcel. I think that's the same as trying to find one niche, one thing that you are about. That's so unhuman. You know what I mean? Unless it is, we are 8 billion people, unless it is what's natural to you. I think unless you really are someone who craves going deep on one topic. And I think each of us have both of these impulses within us. So when we let things become, we also allow ourselves to access our full wisdom and intelligence. What do I mean by that? There's that classic example of a mother who is trying to save her child and the car is burning in a fire, and suddenly she's able to access the strength that she never knew was possible, right? And it's unconscious. It's not that she's deciding, okay, now I'm going to tap into my supersonic strength. And yet we have to believe that strength was always in her, and her body had the intelligence to kick in that adrenaline such that she was able to expand in her capacity, that fight or flight response. That is natural intelligence that she tapped into in a situation that we would wish would not occur. But a more positive spin on this is when we let things become, for example, when we speak with no preparation or with no, preparation is a difficult word because our lives are our preparation. You know what I mean? Everything I've ever thought, read, experienced prepared me for this moment. But that's the point. There's an intelligence that's bigger than us, a wisdom that's bigger than us, a collective wisdom as well, that we can access. But when we try to exert too much dominance and control over something, when we try to plan everything, we do a disservice to that intelligence. You actually have everything you need to begin right now. And to keep going, because beginning is the one thing. It's very difficult, but to keep going. You actually have everything you need, but you assume that there's so much that you need to go and acquire and plan for. Acquire as in knowledge-wise, like there's more books you need to read, there's more things you need to know, there's more life experiences you need to have, that you do such a disservice to what you've already experienced. And so by letting it become, by sitting down and saying, I'm going to speak, words are going to come out, and those words are going to be meaningful to someone. You're honoring the fact that you have this bigger wisdom in you that you can tap into. We are all so wise. That's something I deeply believe. We are all so wise. With a pencil in your hand, you're going to draw something, babe. It doesn't have to be what is good, you're going to draw something. You're going to allow yourself to let it become, because that's what we do. In our being is the state of becoming, which is so paradoxical and wonderful. Because basically becoming is a process of letting things be again and again and again, right? So you start the podcast, you press record, and then you let the first word be. Then you let the second word be. Then you let the third word be. It just is. It's not being forced. It's being pulled from the depths of both personal and collective wisdom, which are connected, which are necessarily co-constitutive, right? You are part of the collective is part of you. So if I said to you, babe, let's record a podcast right now, I'm telling you, you would come up with something that people would want to listen to because you have all the wisdom within you and because you are letting it become. I just think there's so much we are underestimating about our power to create. And similarly, when we think of the relationship example, when we tell ourselves we know what we want in a person, I think sometimes we are depriving ourselves from letting things become. And I'm not saying, because the things that people say when you ask them what they're looking for, it's not, I want someone who really makes me feel alive. I want someone who I have a deep connection with. I want intimacy. I want them to be this height. It depends obviously who you ask, but I want them to be this height. I want them to be this role. It's like a status symbol versus a partner. Now we can get into that more, but essentially, when we say, okay, I want to let it become, there are some constraints. Like obviously I'm not saying have no standards. I'm not saying have no desires, even for what you create. We all desire to create something, for example, meaningful. If this episode became something, became something that I was not happy with sharing, then I simply would let it become something that I don't share. But when we let the constraints be a little bit less constrained, we allow ourselves to be open to more possibilities. We surrender in a way. Let's talk about relationships and letting things become. Things evolve in a way that can be really painful in some ways and really beautiful in others. The painful evolution is, for example, friendships. Oh my word. That you thought would be there for the whole of your life, that you thought this is my ride or die, this is my person, and the absolute heartbreak and terror when it turns out that that was not the case. It's so painful. And I'm in my late 20s, and I think it's a natural time where some of those friendships start to wither, and it's extremely painful. And my best friend has this analogy that he learned from, I think, a TED Talk, that basically friendships are like a forest. You have your root friends, okay? You're the tree maybe. And the root friends, those are the people who make you feel stable and grounded. They are your earth people. They make you feel like, okay, I'm tethered. I belong. And many of us don't have that. And no wonder we feel like we're floating, like we have no sense of place. I'm very, very grateful that I have those root friends. And then you have the friends, on the other hand, who are like butterflies. They come in and out of your life unpredictably, randomly. Maybe you catch up after 5 years, after 2 years, after 3 months, and it's wonderful, but it's a butterfly. You can't hang on to it. You can't cling to it. You can't make it into a root. And something very painful is when a root becomes a butterfly. It's so painful. Okay? When someone you used to be so rooted in becomes a fleeting presence in your life, and even more painful may be the complete loss of that person from the ecosystem. They completely left the building. They're not a root, they're not a butterfly, they're not a leaf, they're not a flower, they're gone. And the loss of that, it's uprooted. Like you've lost a root, you are less stable until you can find more roots. And so when I say let it become, unfortunately, it's also facing the facts of what has become. Because I think sometimes we know something has changed, but we try to cling to the fact that it was. I actually have always had an episode idea in my mind when a root becomes a butterfly, of unpacking the pain of lost friendships or the pain of a change in a friendship closeness that you could not have predicted. It's very painful. It's very painful. And yet we know that in the book, The Wisdom of Insecurity, he says that composition and decomposition are fundamental to life. It's the whole idea that birth and death, there are all these processes that are always and already happening, and that are fundamental and inextricable from the life experience. So sometimes letting it become means letting things die or acknowledging when they have died. It's extremely painful, but it's facing a deeper truth. Last year, when I was going through a breakup, it was the exact same period where my best friend came into my life. And so this idea of birth and death, so co-constitutive, often so coupled that when one space in our life dies, it's also a space which is also generative, which is also giving birth for something else to enter that space. And that's why breakups can be so deeply powerful, because even though they're so painful, they always open up a space to love ourselves more, a space to be more honest with ourselves, a space to interrogate why we were in that relationship at all, which is what I interrogated with that breakup, is like, why did we do this to ourselves? Why were we not true to ourselves? So there was the death of the relationship. There was the space for intimacy. There was the friendship that came out of that. And that friendship was something that we let become because we hadn't spoken in like 6 years. We went to university together. We met there in our like final year. We had a beautiful connection, but it was by no means that we were best friends. We just had meaningful, deep conversations when we were together. And I remember he said to me, you have star power. You're going to be a star. Right now, I'm just trying to do my best to share my voice, but it was just a funny thing to say. And then like 6 years later, I kid you not, he DMs me on Instagram. And mind you, I used to not really read Instagram DMs at the time. And so it was just so shocking that I opened this one and that I read it. And he was saying, how do you deal with all the TikTok hate? And how do you deal with just even the frightfulness of going viral? And then this started a whole friendship. And now we speak like every single day for more than an hour. And we let it become, it was so shocking to me that we were so aligned. And it's just completely not anything I could have predicted. And it's amazing. You know what I mean? Amazing. Because I'm so loved and held. And then there's the friend you lock eyes with and you're like, I'm in it for life, babe. That's what happened with me and my other best friend. She and I speak less often, but we are just soul sisters. You know what I mean? And I just love her so deeply. And I feel like I am making a new best friend or a new person who is someone I consider a sister. And that's been so amazing. And I love just falling in love again and again with people. So in letting it become, we surrender the illusion that we are in control. And we create space for becoming. And just sitting down to do the thing that you want to do, that your heart feels called to, is a way of making space for becoming. But another thing is we can't be overly judgmental of what becomes until it's fully become. What do I mean by this? So you can't write and edit at the same time. Like you have to let yourself have the first draft, because then it's become. If you are writing and editing, well, you are curtailing the possibilities of that thing before they've even been given a chance to fully be. If you're writing an essay, you can't say, okay, I'm going to write a word, edit a word, write a word, edit a word. Like I do this all the time, but I'm failing to let it become what my spirit felt so called to write about. So it's about surrendering control and understanding that there is a place for editing. There is a place for judging, but the place is not now. The place is not now. So trusting in the process, I think, is another form of letting it become. I am really, really rooting for your becoming, not as a person, because here you are. Remember, being and becoming are related, but that you'll give yourself more room to play. Play is divine becoming. Let's just talk about that, because play is so unpredictable. Play is a form of surrendering to simply how little control we have. I think improv is another beautiful example of this. Improv is letting it become in its purest form. Because it's saying, listen, what's in the box? There's no box, but I'll say, ooh, a hamster. You know what I mean? I don't do improv, but I think there's so much wisdom we can draw from that craft. Dancing, oh my goodness, it's letting it become. Ooh, singing, like making things up. Play is letting it become. Playfulness, embracing life with a sense of playfulness. That to me is such an epitomizing example of letting it become. Children, I just saw this child and they were walking on the ground and they just made it a hopscotch thing. I forgot the name. They let it become. They used their imagination to let it become something it wasn't. It is. I mean, who am I to say it wasn't? So imagination, sensuality, play, these are all forms of letting something become what it is calling to be. But we have to be in that space of play in order to experience play. And I think as adults, we're so deprived from the wisdom and the experience of play. And play is becoming. When you're in a conversation with someone, I have this one friend, when I speak to her, I literally have no clue what's going to happen, but I feel like I'm dancing. Like I feel like I'm playing with life. Like it's funny, I'm laughing, I'm giggling. It's so divine. It's so wonderful. It's delicious. And I've surrendered completely. I'm not trying to control it. I'm not trying to make it be something. I'm just surrendering to it and I'm letting it become. Actually, when I was speaking about dating, how often do we deprive ourselves of becoming by overly like interviewing people in the beginning of the experience? That is not letting it become. You don't need to interview someone. You can experience them. You know? Just allow yourself. What if this was the last conversation you had before you were going to die? There's a podcast that asks you to ask that when you're on a date. You're going to try and make that the most playful, fun, and beautiful conversation you could have. You're not going to say, so what do you do when this, how many this do you like? No, that's trying to fix something. It's trying to tie a parcel over water, because also you're trying to judge someone as something. That's another thing with becoming. First impressions don't define someone. How someone seems at the beginning isn't who they are. So let that become also. That's why I also always believe, unless it was horrendous, like obviously, like with a little bit of, but if you're unsure, just go on another date. Because you don't know what it's going to become. You don't know if that person was nervous. You don't know if they just are more guarded around new people. You have no idea how the human spirit and all the directions it can be. So judgment is a form of the opposite of letting it become. It's a form of tying the parcel around the water. It's saying, I know what this is. This is a this thing. I know what type of person this is. This is a this type of person. No. Everything is so much more complex than that. We reduce people to the thing that we find difficult about them, ignoring the fact that that's often a projection of ourselves. You know what I mean? No one is one thing. No one is simply that one thing you don't like about them. Yet we say, oh, that person is unreliable. We don't give them a chance. We don't give ourselves a chance even to see the fullness of what's underlying the behavior that we observe. So letting it become is also, let us surprise ourselves. Let us be surprised. Allow ourselves to not say we already know how this is going to go. I have no idea how anything is going to go. What I can do, within reasonable parameters of self-love and self-respect and mutual love for others, is let it become. It is daunting. But there is wisdom in it. There's wisdom in surrender, play, sensuality, dancing, movement, improvisation, which comes in cooking. It comes in speaking. We're always improvising. We don't need the art of improv. We can embrace all the ways in our lives we're already improvising. Am I not improvising? But I'm trusting myself and I'm trusting the universe. Whatever you believe in, I'm not going to tell you what to believe in. Putting trust in something and allowing yourself to surrender to it. And realizing it's not that serious. It's not that deep. When I started my podcast, I'd have sleepless nights. Babe, it was not that serious. You know what I mean? There's no need for me to be losing sleep over something. And yet I do so often. With this podcast, I don't even know what it's going to become. But I'm just letting it be. Each week I'm saying, what does my heart feel called to say? So these 3 words came to my mind about 5 days ago. And basically what I do is, if I'm journaling, I just write down episode 23 and then I write the title. Because the title for me encapsulates the energy that the idea carries for me. And then I start to relate to those words. So that's why I was saying, even though I haven't written anything down, I've been preparing through my conscious and subconscious mind over these past days. And so that's what I also think, is that letting it become is also allow yourself to take a nap. So how can we be more open and be in much of a state of surrender and trust ourselves and trust in each other and trust that we have so much love to give. We only need to stop ourselves from always trying to silence that giving. We have so much wisdom to share. We only need to learn the skill. It is a skill of allowing space for that wisdom to breathe. The other day I was in a room and I didn't even realize I was sitting next to a fire, and someone opened the door and suddenly I felt the warmth of the fire. So it's oxygen for the fire to grow. Everything needs space, right? So sometimes that's what we are craving. It's just the space to let that voice inside of us speak, to let it unfold, to let it become. So I'll ask you, what will you surrender to this week? What will you allow to manifest through you instead of trying to exert your control on it? Instead of trying to exert all your control, instead of all the planning, which guests am I going to have? What are the topics going to be? When am I going to stop? Just stop. Because it's when you pause that you tap into a strength, a wisdom, an intelligence, a power that is bigger than your ability to plan. When you just open up your throat chakra, or when you just sit down with the pencil in your hand or the keyboard in front of you. And in our relationship, babes, how can we be a bit more open-hearted and open-minded, open-souled, that we have no idea what will make us happy? You know what I mean? We can't predict the type of person who would be a really good friend to us. We can't predict the type of person who would be a really good partner to us. We can create some of the parameters, but the more we loosen those parameters, like the more we make them extremely reasonable and rooted in our love needs, but not so ridiculous that they're just turning the human spirit into a commodity, like someone's height or what they can do for us. How can we release some of those constraints so that we can invite the becoming? So for you, if you've been planning, it's time to go from planning to letting becoming, right? It's a divine doing. It's not just do it. It's create a space. Sit down with the mic, see what happens. You can write things down. I often write things out. I'm not against planning. Usually I write things down, but today I wanted to not do that because I wanted to tap into randomness. Like who at the end of this 30 minutes, I couldn't have predicted what would happen versus the beginning. And that's the power of letting it become. Just as a seed, we have no idea the potential for our seeds to grow. All we can do is nourish them. So I hope that your seeds are nourished. I hope that you nourish those seeds. I hope your community and people around you are there to nourish those seeds. If you don't have access to that in person, I hope you seek out the voices that nourish you. I hope you have a clear understanding of your relationship to the content that you consume and which content cuts you off from that innate power you have, because comparison is that, right? And which content expands you. Is this constricting me or is this expanding me? Do not try to not consume anything that constricts you. If there's a person who consistently makes you feel terrible, unfollow, block, mute. If there's a type of content that consistently makes you feel you're not doing enough or you could be doing more in a negative way, block that out of your field. I'm such a be stingy with your consciousness. Maybe that'll be the next episode. Actually, it sounds pretty good to me. Let it become. I think it's so important to limit ourselves from constricting media. And so much of the media we consume constricts us. And open ourselves up to voices, people, thoughts, ideas, art, work that expands us. For me, laughter is my expansion as well. I love laughing. Being in love and community is an expander. So hopefully we're understanding what energizes us so that we can let things become from that place of expansion. Versus when you let things become from constriction. If you just consume something you're so envious of and then you let it become, what is it going to become? Maybe it's going to be about proving yourself instead of honoring yourself. Ooh, that would be a good episode as well. Don't prove yourself to others. Honor yourself, because that is how best to serve the collective as well. When we honor that part of us, that's our inner child, that's our inner just being, that's our inner manifestation of love. That's who we should be honoring. The part of us that wants to be loved, the part of us that is love, the part of us that craves love, that I think, creating from that space is the highest form of creation in my mind. So I hope that you will let it become. I'm supporting you on your journey of becoming a person who let things become. I'm supporting you on your journey of embracing, surrender, play, randomness, chaos. Chaos is fundamental to the human existence, yet we deny its possibility and we deny its reality in our everyday lives and the role that it plays. So let's embrace the chaos that is constitutive of the human experience. Chaos can serve us. Isn't magic a form of chaos? Or is chaos a form of magic? You decide. I love you so much. You have nothing to prove to anyone, not even to yourself. You are divine, meaning you are a manifestation of all the magic that exists in the universe, the stars, the trees, the rivers. When you think of those things, don't you think of something so profoundly, I want to say the word beautiful, but the spiritual beauty. And you're made of the same substance. There is no reason we could not be invited to see ourselves and see each other with that same magic as the stars, as the oceans, as the trees, as the leopards. I hope that you will honor the magic in you by understanding that you cannot fully contain, predict, or control its expression. I hope you have a delicious week. I'll see you on next week's episode. I have no idea what it's going to be about. I cannot wait for it to become, okay? Love you so much. Have a great day. Bye. I hope some paradigms have been shifted for you in today's conversation. As always, if you can, please leave a 5-star rating on Apple and Spotify. Like, comment, subscribe. I love you so, so much. Okay? I love you. Join me on my Substack. Links in the comment section. Go there. Okay? Love you so much. Love you. Bye.